So before we start, I just wanted to let everyone know that we will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of our session. Also, that there is a chat box where you're all welcome to type your questions or comments as we go along. Something that would be helpful is if you have a question that you'd like for Sheri or myself to follow up on after the call, if you could leave an email address where we can best contact you in the chat box, that would be very helpful. So some of you may have encountered the principles of adaptive leadership through your professional work or through service and other volunteer roles outside of PTA. But I wanted to make sure that we set a common understanding of what we'll talk through today. Adaptive leadership is first a leadership framework that helps individuals and organizations adapt and thrive in challenging environments. Second, it describes the leadership ability of being able, both as an individual and as a team, to take on the gradual process of change. And third, it's all about determining which leadership capabilities are actually important versus the ones that are just kind of nice to have, while bringing about real improvements for the group. So I've intentionally bolded some of the phrases here on the slides, and I'd like for you to think about whether or not the ideas of thriving in challenging environments, change, and improvements for the group seem like issues that might be important to you in your current PTA roles. Next slide. For me, my work as a local PTA leader might actually best be summed up by those ideas of challenging environments, change, and the constant pursuit to try to help the organization better accomplish our mission. Which is exactly why we thought that sharing these principles and tools with local leaders was so important. PTA life is complex. There are a number of internal and external factors that impact how we need to approach leadership. Our local PTAs often struggle to find or engage volunteers. There are barriers to how we can communicate with our PTA communities. There are sometimes differences in languages, not enough information, too much information sometimes. There are other organizations competing for our time and for the time of our members. This is a time of life when we have a lot of youth sports going on, extracurricular activities, work, just everyday life. Our local PTAs are faced with shrinking resources in terms of time, funding, energy, membership. Our volunteer turnover can be high as families move on to new campuses, which means there's not a lot of time for in-depth training, and a lot of knowledge transfer and experience is simply lost at the local level. The list of challenges can seem a little bit daunting at times. So what I'd like for you all to do right now is just a little bit of self-reflection. If you feel like you'd like to share some of your responses in the chat box, we'd love to see them. A question for all of you to consider: what might be some other types or themes of leadership challenges that you are facing today as a local leader of a PTA? So while you think about those, or while you type them in the chat box, in response to a number of those challenges, PTA does an excellent job of putting some structure in place to help us navigate them. There is a national, state, or local procedure for just about anything. There are training requirements specified in our local bylaws. There is a resource guide for nearly every single board position. The very way that our organization operates makes most rule followers very, very happy. So is it any wonder then that as leaders, we're surprised or even feel unprepared when we're met with a challenge that we can't find an answer to in our bylaws or standing rules? So another question for you all to consider is, what are some examples of rules or policies that you feel sometimes tie your hands as a local PTA leader? This adaptive leadership framework helps leaders how to lead, how to look at a challenge, how to ask the right questions versus which specific rules or policies state an outcome should be. It allows you as the local leader to incorporate the unique set of circumstances and background information of your campus or board or membership. And it encourages you to make decisions that are driving the best possible outcomes for your PTA. So in a lot of ways, adaptive leadership can be that thing that unties your hands. I'm just looking at the chat box, and we do have a couple of comments that said that they encountered a lot of challenges. There's a first-year president on a PTA, and mid-year had to take over the president role. So there's some technical competence to be gained during that year. Also, we had somebody who took over mid-year, but as treasurer, there are a lot of challenges to that. So both of those sound like unexpected leadership roles that happened kind of mid-planning cycle with lots of rules and processes to learn. Those are great. Thank you. Next slide. So I want to preface this slide by saying this is the part of the presentation where I explain that there is nothing at all about adaptive leadership that says, Jeannie Deakyne told us that we don't have to listen to Texas PTA President Sheri when she tells us that our bylaws and standing rules have to be reviewed every 3 years. I'm not saying that at all. Adaptive leadership is not Texas PTA anarchy. It's simply an additional set of qualities and tools that empowers you as a leader to be creative and to be flexible and to empower others to make sound and informed choices with the PTA mission at the heart of your decision-making processes. So what exactly does an adaptive leader look like? We've really tried to capture the qualities of an adaptive leader on this slide. First, an adaptive leader is an effective communicator who's able to convey how PTA's purpose, vision, and mission is incorporated into all of their actions. So I'm not implying that you need to be able to recite the PTA mission statement and vision and purpose on command, but can you currently succinctly tie how your programs and fundraisers and services support helping every child reach their potential? And can you do that to all of your different stakeholders, to your members, teachers, community leaders, and non-members? Second, and speaking of stakeholders, adaptive leaders are flexible and work well within a variety of situations and with various groups of people. As a leader, do you make assumptions that everyone on your board is motivated by the same things that motivate you? Or do you take the time to get to know that each board member has different hopes to get something out of their PTA service? Third, adaptive leaders are strategic thinkers. They have an understanding of the current issues affecting PTA, as well as the vision on how to connect to the PTA's day-to-day activities. For example, they think about opportunities to align their programs with a specific need at the campus, or they see how a local issue facing their district ties into one of Texas PTA's legislative priorities. Fourth, adaptive leaders are courageous. They have learned to deal openly and transparently with conflicting ideas. And they demonstrate insight in how differences in values, beliefs, and culture can actually make the PTA better. Perhaps they've taken a course or have read a book on conflict management. They hold icebreakers with their board to help demonstrate the value of different perspectives, all contributing to a discussion or a conversation. They understand that their role as a leader is not necessarily to advocate for their own opinion, but to help create an environment where others' opinions are shared and heard. Fifth, they're critical thinkers. Adaptive leaders have an attitude of curiosity aimed at widening perspective and broadening knowledge. They never stop learning. They're always looking to attend the most interesting sessions at launch, and they can't wait to share what they've learned with the rest of the board. They forward articles of interest to their boards and their members. They encourage and recognize leaders who attend development trainings and are always looking to help develop a future board member. And sixth, they are relationship builders. They understand the importance of building and maintaining relationships, both within and outside of PTA, and support and improve the PTA's effectiveness. They look for opportunities to work with other leaders who share common knowledge or challenges or have experience with creative solutions. They love to connect others who could benefit from working on projects together. Next slide. So what exactly does this look like in your PTA? All of the following are practices that we believe that you can start putting into action in your local PTA today. First, you can put your PTA strategy and focus at the forefront of all of your plans and activities. When you're interacting with your PTA team, you can create and communicate purpose, you can set direction, but you don't need to micromanage. You can allow your team to develop their leadership capabilities too, because you're always thinking about that next leadership member. Continually think and assess and improve the capability of your PTA. Have you looked into the National PTA School of Excellence program? It's a fantastic rubric that you can measure your effectiveness against. You can find creative ways to support the people and the chairs and the committees who are already doing a great job at delivering PTA results. You can really celebrate excellence in all that they're doing, because excellence builds more excellence. You can enable your board to act fast, adjust quickly, and learn from failure in a very safe environment. Your board together can learn to take risks. And you can seek out and build a diversity of perspectives. You can learn more and generate a broader set of solutions. So what Sheri and I would like to do next is to take just a few minutes to share a couple of real-life case studies where we both employed adaptive leadership into our decision-making. Sheri, would you like to start by sharing a little bit of background on one of your Rally Day experiences?
Yes. So Jeannie had asked me to think back on a leadership or on an opportunity that I've had as a PTA leader at the state level, when I've had to really put adaptive leadership into practice. And so I thought back to a new look for Rally Day. So this was last term when I assumed the position of advocacy chair, which is automatic for the president-elect. And so some of our obstacles that we had, well, there were 3 listed on the screen for sure, but we were really trying to ramp up the attendance at Rally Day and ensure that you all as leaders understood the importance of showing up and actually advocating for our children in great numbers. So what we did was took a look at the bills that were sort of on the table that particular session. They were pretty critical bills, but we looked at some that we thought would affect everyone across, socioeconomic levels, across race, no matter what, but that it was a concern that every single parent would be worried about. So that particular session, we were addressing powdered alcohol and access to it from our minors, and also increasing school funding, which is always on our list. Of course, we were very successful this past session in finally getting some funding for that. And so that was definitely something that rang of concern with everyone for sure. So we just really began to address and identify our challenges to see if we can get more people involved in the advocacy of Texas PT on behalf of all of our children in Texas. So the 3 obstacles that we identified, one was fear of advocacy. Most of our leaders didn't really understand what advocacy meant. And even myself, I found the word intimidating initially, until I really took a deep dive into what advocacy means. And realized that all it really meant was that we speak up on someone else's behalf. In this particular case in Texas PTA, we speak up on behalf of our children. So really we advocate all the time, every single day. It was just a matter of channeling it and focusing on those issues that we were concerned about regarding our children. So I did put out sort of a challenge to everyone to learn and grow in advocacy along with me. And that advocacy really is for them as well. I know I used to think, yes, for other people, that know all the lingo and, have these relationships with the legislators and things. But that's not really true. Every single one of us, as you guys have learned since then, have a voice and can make a difference with our lawmakers in terms of our children. So the second challenge really was, can I really make a difference? I knew I've heard people say, oh, why should I vote? It's only one vote. It's not going to matter. Or, I go up and talk to them. They're not really listening. They've already made up their mind. But the legislators do listen to you. If for no other reason, you're their constituents. And most of them want to be elected the next term. In order to do that, they have to make the constituents happy. And so they do actually listen. Texas PTA has the advantage of having over 500,000 members. And that means something to the legislators. It certainly does when I would show up, and even Susie at this point, to testify and say that we represent 500,000. They kind of step and pay attention a little bit more. In this particular term, we were actually able to empower all of you all to answer those calls of action. And when you did that, oh my gosh, you guys did it like nobody had ever done it before. And really, really got their attention. So we actually do have the ability to make a difference, and you guys have already done that. So you know that adaptive leadership is really working. And then the last obstacle really was, logistics and attending Rally Day. So prior to, we really had we would only get about 300 or so individuals that come to Rally Day. And so when you reach out to all of the local leaders, you have to understand what their concerns are, what would keep them from coming. And so, some of the questions we wanted to help answer was, how do I manage my kids if I want to come to Rally Day? And, what do I say to the legislators when I get there? And how do we pay for the cost of transportation? And what about lunch? And how do I set up my meetings with the legislators? And what do I wear? So looking at those obstacles, we designed our training, and very in-depth training, to address all of those challenges. And we started really with a discussion about advocacy. Just a basic definition of it, as I mentioned before, is speaking up on behalf of everyone, of someone. In this case, it is the children. So we went ahead and we conducted and recorded targeted webinars on the logistics of attending Rally Day, in-depth discussion on our Texas PTA legislative priorities to make sure that everyone understood what they meant. And we even had webinars and recorded trainings on holding effective meeting with the legislators. And so that was all done online. But then at launch, we held several workshops, in-person workshops, where we shared similar information, but we were able to answer your specific questions to make sure that you were prepared and ready and confident. And in particular, just holding those conversations with the legislators. We even had a workshop where we did role play. And we sort of chose scenarios that you might find yourself in, and an example of how you might respond to some of those, so that you knew what to expect when you got there at Rally Day and actually met with your legislators. So we also encourage our leaders to not only educate themselves, but to educate the students on our legislative priorities and bring them to Rally Day. So we had started a youth caucus a couple years before, but because of weather, we really didn't get that many in attendance. So this in 2017 was the second time that we were having our youth caucus, and we really want the youth not to be there just to listen or be bored, but to really start realizing that they have the ability to stand up for themselves as well. And it's really up to us to train them to become the leaders of tomorrow. And so we encourage you all to make sure you educated them on their legislative priorities as well, specifically the ones that we knew the youth would be interested in, and allow them to actually hold those meetings with the legislators and speak up for themselves. And then the other part about Rally Day is that, typically it had just been, we show up, we get a ton of information, and then we take off to our meetings and we have these conversations. But this particular year, I thought, this needs to be sort of a fun and exciting event. And if nothing else, the Capitol should know that Texas PTA was there. So, let's make some noise, let's make a huge event out of this. So we decided to invite mascots and bands and cheerleaders, and we planned a procession from the adult and youth caucus to the Capitol steps for the rally. And that made it was quite a vision to see. And then we had also set a goal of having at least 1,000 leaders in attendance at Rally Day. And not just because 1,000 is a big number, it really is, certainly much larger than the 300 we typically had in the past. But that 1,000 meant something. It meant that if we got at least 1,000 individuals there, and each person represented 5,000 children, then collectively we would literally be advocating on behalf of all 5.1 million children in the state of Texas, and that's very important. So, needless to say, we had so much success. We, had about 1,200 attendees. I think it was about 400 students that particular year. And even legislators who wouldn't hold meetings with us before the event, we made so much noise that they were quickly texting the office trying to get a hold of the president at the time and some other key Texas PTA leaders to go ahead and talk with us and see what it was we were making all that noise about. So that was pretty amazing. And of course, we were all over social media. We had our hashtags, 1K for Rally Day. And then in 2019, it was 2K for Rally Day. We more than exceeded both of those numbers. So So in revamping the Rally Day, using those adaptive leadership qualities, we really focused on 3 of the adaptive leadership qualities, and one was communication. So again, we micro-focus our message and our training on how our PTA leaders were feeling about advocacy, because you got to feel good about it if you're going to walk in and be confident in advocating. And so our leaders, they felt really empowered and knowledgeable, and really it's been no stopping you guys since. I mean, this last session was absolutely amazing, and anytime we put out a call of action, you guys answer, and we've been able to make some really positive changes in our legislation for our kids. And now when I hear you all talk about it, you're using words like you're so excited and you can't wait versus, well, that's not me, or I'm not too sure, or I'm intimidated. So that's really, really key, and definitely a sign of progress in terms of getting everyone comfortable with advocating. And then we also had to be very strategic. So it was important to think strategically, not only about the process, but about the individual just feeling confident and educated and ready to hold a conversation with our legislators. So again, we had that number out there and the reason behind the number. We had all those trainings in session in person and also available online several times so that you could become comfortable with everything, and as well as holding those conversations. So when we introduced ourselves, when we got to Rally Day that year, we knew that we were ready, we were confident. We had 1,000 people that represented all of the students in the state of Texas, and we were ready to fight and advocate for our kids. And then lastly is the relationship building. So we encouraged you all to go out and actually build relationships with your legislators while they were home before they actually headed to the Capitol, getting ready for the legislative session. And that was pretty critical, because that way at Rally Day, it wouldn't be the first time that they had actually seen you, had met with them, and certain your comfort level will be a lot better. And quite a number of the leaders have done that, and since have continued to build those relationships, because I see it on social media. And we're being invited to different events that they're having, and they're seeking out our opinion and things like that on different topics or bills that they are wanting to introduce. And even Susan and I have already been contacted already about certain bills, particularly around the vaping, after we had the extremely successful straight talk I think it was last week, losing track of days, around the vaping epidemic. So we've had several legislators reach out to us wanting to get support, I'm sure, on some bills around the vaping epidemic, and so that we can continue to fight that as a team. So these relationships have definitely paid off and are going to make us far more effective than we really had ever been before. So it's really a great time in Texas PTA in terms of our advocating. And for me, it's just really amazing to see the turnaround in the engagement and advocacy of our PTA leaders throughout the state, even for those of you at the local level. I mean, you answer those calls to action, and you're reaching out to your legislators, and it's awesome. I mean, we're at the point where the legislators are asking us what language we want to see in the bills. Now that's powerful. And that's you all. You all have done that. So in order to get there, of course, you have to adapt, right? Whatever your project is or your goals are, to have these types of results. So the model that we had before didn't yield this. And so just sort of thinking about these three qualities and what we can do to enhance them, to grow our participation and understanding, and really empower you all as PTA leaders. I'd say it worked. So that's definitely one of the successes that I can share with you all on adaptive leadership in PTA. Jeannie?
I think that's a fantastic example of how, when you apply these adaptive leadership qualities, you can really transform the outcome of a PTA project or scenario. What I wanted to share a little bit about was how I think it's also a very helpful framework that makes a lot of good sense in our daily lives. So if you'd move to the next slide, Sheri. I have learned that adaptive leadership is particularly helpful when interacting with my children, and I mean this completely sincerely. As the mother of 3 elementary school age girls, I often find myself at wit's end with motivating and encouraging them. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, or if you remember that. And it can be across scenarios ranging from accomplishing or completing their homework to just making good choices, and everything in between. So I've found that a number of factors complicate parent-child relationships. They have different ages, they're at different phases of development, they all have unique interests, they each respond differently to motivation and encouragement. The 2 youngest of my children are identical twins, which presents its own set of factors and can be somewhat confusing to 7-year-olds who are really just each trying to define their own perspectives on life. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of barriers to success here. With this busy, on-the-go household, our family absolutely needs everyone's participation in household chores in order for us to function. The task of completing these chores is often the focus of a lot of our conversation and coordination and disagreement, but it has become less of a struggle after my husband and I considered how we could actually apply these principles of adaptive leadership. So rather than a one-size-fits-all approach to dividing up our family chores, we let the girls provide input into the areas that really matched up most with their interests and abilities. So my 10-year-old, who's named Libby, she loves the process involved with doing laundry. She's a natural delegator. She's great at reminding each family member to get his or her clothing down to the laundry room and to pick up the clean laundry to take back to their rooms. So she loves being in charge of the process. Emma Kate, who is age 7, she loves to set and clear the dining room table. It's a natural fit for her because she loves a sense of order, and she really enjoys the social aspect of being able to talk to her parents while she's working and we're cooking. And then our other twin, Evie, she's also 7, she takes the lead on feeding and walking and caring for our dog, Bonnie. She has a really gentle spirit and a real heart for animals, and she loves taking ownership of making sure that the animals' needs are met. So likewise, we let them inform us how they like to best receive recognition and encouragement for completing these tasks. Libby really enjoys verbal praise and affirmation that she's in charge, and the sense that her parents trust her to do a good job. Emma Kate likes to use a chore chart. It's a good visual reminder to her of what she still needs to accomplish. And she loves to show her sisters and her friends the gold stars that she has earned for completing each task. And Evie, a kid after my own heart, really enjoys the autonomy that comes with staying on top of her responsibilities. So she gets the personal freedom from her mom and dad to do her own thing and to allocate her own time as long as the dog is taken care of. Next slide. So I found that the principles that I employ most when interacting with my family about these household chores are, first, adaptability. We let go of the idea that every child in our family had to accomplish the same type of work, the same volume of work, and demonstrated flexibility in letting their own strengths and preferences drive how we collectively accomplish the tasks. Likewise, we're also very open to acknowledging that motivation and encouragement would look differently for each of them. The other one is critical thinking. We found that just being open to a new and not uniform approach of parenting took a level of curiosity and learning for us. Kids don't come with a manual. Twins certainly don't come with a manual, and we're not parenting experts. So we read up on what chores were age appropriate and why providing flexibility was important in child development. And we asked questions of other parents and of our kids. Then we applied what we learned, evaluated the results, adjusted where necessary, and we continuously use that process. It's amazing what kids and families can accomplish when, as parents, we're open to learning more about how the individuals can contribute to the whole. So I think that that's just a really great lesson learned about adaptive leadership and how you can apply it in things that you're doing on a daily basis. Next slide. We know that there's been a lot of new information provided here today, but we wanted to provide you with a couple of takeaway exercises to help frame how adaptive leadership can best apply to the leadership challenges that you're encountering in your local PTAs. So the first exercise focuses on framing what is your PTA purpose. When you're completing this exercise, really the point is to just kind of self-reflect and think about and answer the following questions. Why do you volunteer with the PTA? What about PTA inspires you? How do your values shape the way that you lead? How should they? And what impact or contribution do you want to make in your PTA? So not only is this exercise a great way to think about why you are currently engaged in PTA now, but it's also something that you can reflect and look back on a year from now or even 5 years from now to see how all of the answers to those questions may have changed. It's also a very effective tool to share with members of your PTA leadership team. You could have them complete the same exercise and share their responses. There's really so much value in being able to see where you all have commonalities in your responses to these questions, but also where you have different responses. Next slide. And the second takeaway exercise that we provided you here today will help you focus on how you could spend your time more effectively as a PTA leader. It challenges you to think about where you do currently spend your leadership energy. Are you spending most of your time reminding board members about deadlines, answering resource questions, creating sign-up geniuses? Where could you be spending your time and getting more impactful or sustainable or long-lasting results? Could you be spending time developing relationships with administrators or other key stakeholders? Could you be growing and encouraging new leaders? Could you be providing training? Again, this is not only a useful tool for you to complete, but it's a fantastic resource to share with your board members to help them reset and refocus their own activities, or something that you could do halfway through the year for the remainder of the PTA year to really help them set some goals. So really the opportunities on how you could use this exercise are pretty limitless. Next slide. And finally, if you are looking for some additional resources on how to put the principles of adaptive leadership into action, I recommend the following readings. And I've got a more exhaustive list if you're looking for more. 4 great resources are Thank You for Being Late by Thomas Friedman, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith, Onward by Howard Schultz, and True North by Bill George. So with that, Sheri, do you want to open it up for some questions about what we covered today?
Yes, if the participants that have a question would just click on the raise your hand, then we can call on you. And Megan, I'm going to need your help identifying those that have raised their hand, or put a question in the chat box. I don't know if you guys are typing. We're just trying to give you some time.
You have one. I'm going to unmute you, Cami Herrera.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Cami Herrera. I'm the PTA president at Pine Tree Birch Elementary School. And I finally got all of our board members to do their training and read their books, but we're still not on the same page as with what is in accordance with what we're supposed to be doing according to bylaws and rules and checklists and stuff in our trainings. There's just disagreement on like how to spend money, where to spend money, and it's not all wanting to go to the kids. And I don't know if it's because of my role, and so I feel more immersed in it than maybe they are, or what. Like I guess, how do I get them to see that we need to spend our money, we're not supposed to hoard our money in our bank account, and that it needs to go to the kids before it goes to us at, say, launch, is kind of honestly where the disconnect is.
Sheri, I'd love to jump in on that, mainly because it's something that my own local PTA was challenged with a couple of years ago. First of all, it's kind of a great problem to have when you think about having enough money where there's some discussion or disagreement about where it goes. So just even in being able to help set that context for the group, I think is helpful. What our PTA ultimately decided to do was to create a process by which everybody's ideas were solicited and then evaluated and heard, demonstrating that we were considering everyone's opinions, and also giving them an opportunity to demonstrate exactly how those recommendations tied back to our mission of helping every child reach their potential. So basically we created what we call an allocations committee that has a one-page application that is distributed to our entire PTA community, where they're given the opportunity to propose recommendations for how funds can be spent by the PTA. And then those recommendations are ultimately prioritized in a way that makes sense to the allocations committee, but then presented to the membership for their approval. So through that process, I think that it's given our board members and our members an opportunity to feel engaged in how we're asking them to spend the money that they've worked really hard raising and making sure that we have available. And then they're able to visibly see a connection between how those proposed and ultimately approved projects are actually supporting the mission of the PTA, rather than it being something where, you know, the loudest voice gets heard, or the way we've always done it is really the area that gets responded to. So I think, you know, giving your board the opportunity to think through a process on how they want to fairly and equitably allocate those funds may be a really great first step.
Any additional questions? And I'll just add to sort of what Jeannie was saying too. You know, when we talk about things like adaptive leadership or any of the topics of the recommended readings that we've shared with you, it really does help to educate yourself on how to work with people, particularly in groups, and get to know them individually and kind of find out why they're there. Just like we've asked you all those questions and self-reflection, it'd be great to share that with your board as well. And when you get that information back, you'll be able to sort of figure out how to work with them, or how to get them to sort of understand what the mission of PTA is and how we actually support that mission through a way that they'll be willing to receive it and understand it. So, you know, like I say, some of the principles here that we talked today, but any of these things, which is why I sort of push leadership development, because your job really first and foremost is about building relationships with individuals on your team and learning them, and how do you get everybody together to reach a common goal. Is there another question?
Go ahead, Diane.
My name's Deakyne Hall, and I am the PTA president at Meadow Creek Elementary in Bedford, Texas. I guess Texas, you know that. My question is how you, I've been trying really hard this year to recruit new people, to bring new people into the board. And I'm finding that the biggest hurdle is people saying that they don't have time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's that they don't have the time. I think it's just it's been the same people doing the same jobs over and over again. So we're doing more than we probably should have to do if we had more people involved. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
like, I don't know how to explain to people that you don't have to be here, you know, the entire school day. It doesn't take, 5 hours every single day, that things can be done in a more efficient manner.
Right. And we hear that often, for sure. And I'm trying to remember where I put this, but there was this, not really a diagram, but it was sort of a chart, sort of, for lack of a better word, where it said, how you can help or be involved in PTA. It doesn't take, like you say, hours and hours. In 10 minutes, you can do this. It takes 10 minutes to do this, to be active in PTA. It takes, maybe 30 minutes, but it was just a whole list. And I can't remember if it's in one of our resource guides or one of our presentations. So I'll have to take a look at that and see where it's at. But that was super helpful to let them know that you can do all kinds of little things. But at least you do have the reason why they say they're not, really getting involved is time constraints. So if they are like working parents and things like that, it's time to really take an in-depth look into the tasks required to put on the programs and things within your PTA, and identify those things that people with little time can actually do and still feel like they're contributing. And I remember many years ago at the local level, I started off in arts and education, and we had reflections, and a lot of the working parents, would say, they would like to be involved in PTA, but all our meetings were in the day, and all those kinds of things, but they want their kids to know that they care and they can contribute. So one of the things that I did was I did do that in-depth look at the tasks that I had available, and then those that could be done on the weekend or at home, I designated those for working parents and reached out to them. And something as simple as, hanging up the Reflections banner on the fence over the weekend was yielded surprising results, because on that Monday, I actually heard the kid in the hallway that was so excited that he and his parents were responsible for putting that banner out on the fence. I mean, he's bragging to everybody. So of course I contacted the parents to let them know, so they also understood that it may have been a small thing, but it was important, and more importantly, it meant the world to their child. So it kind of helped their relationship as well. So maybe just sort of parsing out those tasks and letting them know, well, actually, if you have, an hour a month, these are the things that will really help us if you can knock those out and they can be done at home or what have you. So you can try that as a start. I mean, there's other things, of course, that you would have to address at some point, but that might be a good start to those that feel like they don't have the time.
Okay,
Jeannie,
great.
anything to add?
I was going to say that might actually be a really great opportunity for you to help your current board members do that takeaway tool number 2, where they examine how they are spending their time and maybe how they should be spending their time. Because I think that, as you mentioned, sometimes when we have, everyone does this, when you get settled into a role for a significant amount of time and you just become comfortable with it, you tend to make it your own and build it in a way that makes sense to you. But maybe as you're looking on transitioning those roles to someone else, those board members could be really helpful advocates in shaping what the position really actually needs to look like versus what it's kind of morphed into, so that they can help champion moving that position on to somebody who says that they don't have the time, because maybe it's just a disconnect in understanding how much time actually needs to be spent on the role.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Megan, do you see any hands raised?
Not yet.
Well, I'll add a little bit more to that last question in case someone's typing something in. I would also encourage using committees as they're intended, like a committee of more than one, with those working parents doing those small tasks that they can do. It may not just be working parents either. Some people just have a lot to do, but for those that want to do something and but not take up all their time, but utilizing those committees and involving them on there, and that be a way to sort of build your leadership little by little. So when the time comes, maybe they'll realize as they get more involved that they do have time to be a little bit more involved in PTA and eventually step into those roles that you mentioned. I believe that, it's the same old people doing the same old thing. And sometimes we have to get out of our own way. But when you do that, you do want to be confident you have people coming up behind you that are willing and capable of carrying on the business of PTA.
You've got one in the chat.
Okay. So there's several things in the chat. Again, we've been asked a couple of times, will the slides be sent out? This is actually being recorded and it'll be made available sometime soon after the webinar is over. Megan has to tidy it all up and figure out how to get out to everyone. Kimmy says, love these ideas for involvement, and involvement committees have been great. Involvement committees, sorry, scrolling. Committees have been great for our PTA. A question, I think, from Venzula, how we encourage the leaders to train and understand what the PTA requirements and guidelines are. So if you are, if you belong to a council, you have that level of support where they can come in and do a board training for you all as well. And a lot of times it's a little better to have someone from the outside. If you are an independent, which means you don't belong to a council, then there's an FSR that can come in and help train your leaders understand what the PTA requirements and guidelines are. And then that way it's just someone sort of on the outside of your group that's sort of talking to everyone. But just know that our resource guides and we have recorded webinars available on our website as well for anybody to access whenever they want to. But, you know, it is important for them to know what the requirements are, what's in the bylaws in particular, and what the guidelines are so that you can do the work effectively, and recognize that a lot of those rules and guidelines are not all PTA. We do have other governing associations like the IRS and the state, Texas State Comptroller, and Parliamentary Procedure and National PTA. So, you know, it is important to follow those requirements and guidelines so that you stay in compliance with those other governing agencies as well. So reach out to your FSR or your council leaders to kind of come in and do an overall training for everyone. And that might help set everything. And then there's a question from Sarah. I'm at a middle school with 3 feeder schools, and I feel that our involvement comes heavily from only one of them. We always invite people to get involved, but do you have any suggestions of how to reach out for a more diverse base of volunteers? Jeannie, you want to give that a stab? Jeannie, are you still there?
I am now unmuted.
Okay.
Okay. I think that that's a real challenge at all levels of locals, and it certainly presents itself probably most evidently when you start having the pattern of feeder schools. One way that I think, and it's not easy, but it's something that you can do, is start developing the relationship with the schools before they come to you. So you have a real opportunity, knowing that those 3 schools primarily feed into your middle school PTA, where you can start building that relationship now. So again, going back to being able to build relationships, understanding that your key stakeholders, as far as developing talent coming on its way up, may actually be very, very important at the elementary school level in terms of encouraging those other 2 schools to get involved. And you can do that a number of ways. I've seen junior highs or middle schools hold a PTA sponsored social that isn't just for the kids, it's also for the support networks of those kids. So that would be something that you could host on behalf of those elementary schools before they even get to middle school. That way, you're not being reactionary to the fact that you only have one school of involvement when they get to middle school, but you've already developed those relationships and reached out to those networks ahead of time. That's one recommendation I would make. I don't know if you have others, Sheri.
Yeah, I have a couple others that I would consider. I love what you said too, Jeannie, though. So definitely consider what Jeannie's saying. One of the things I might suggest too is that you all, as middle school PTA leaders, actually go to those other 2 campuses and talk to those parents in whatever forum that might be available where you have access to them, rather than wondering why they're not coming to you once they get to the middle school. Just to let them know, you know, we're here. We want to see that you are, want to make sure that you feel, you know, welcome, and we're really like to see more involvement from all of our campuses. So it may take you going out to their campuses on a regular basis. And I don't mean monthly necessarily, but just, you know, maybe a couple of times a year, but definitely right before, towards the end of the year, right before those 8th grade, I guess 6th grade, I guess depends on where you're at, are graduating from elementary school and coming. And I don't know if this happens in your area, but I know when my daughters were in elementary, we had a day where they went and they visited the middle school and kind of, you know, looked at lockers and got a tour of the school and things like that. Maybe you can do something like that with the parents. schedule something where you invite the parents to come to, for middle school. And then one other thing would be to maybe take a look at your board structure. So there are elected positions. There are several vice presidents that you guys can choose to have. There's also standing committee chairs, and maybe designate some of those positions specifically so that all 3 feeder schools are represented by someone, that they all do have a voice. And it's clear from the board structure that they have a place at the table. So hopefully some of those ideas will help you. And as Jeannie said at the very beginning of the webinar, if you have further questions, just put your email in there and we can reach out to you if you need to talk more. And again, if you have an FSR, reach out to them. If you don't know who it is, just email us, and I certainly can find out who that is. And if you have a council, they can also help you with some of that as well. So Sarah says, thank you. We were there for the 5th grade transition night, and we'll be there for Cub Camp in the fall. Wonderful. Wonderful. And maybe pass something out. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have like some type of invitations to say, hey, we love to see you. We can't wait till you get here as a parent. We have all kinds of opportunities available for you to participate in the PTA and say how important it is, and just over and over again, we really want you to be involved and make this the best middle school years for all of our children. I do find that personal invitations work the best. All right, so it is 12:59. So if you do have any other questions between now and when we actually end the webinar, go ahead and quickly type them in the chat with your email, and we'd be more than happy to get back with you with an answer to your question, just more ideas to try. So with that, I am just going to thank you guys for attending the Team Up call today. Hopefully it's just the beginning of Team Up calls. We made a commitment earlier in the term to provide training specifically for your local PTA leaders. In addition to that we provide for our councils and FSRs. So I do hope that you guys found this very helpful. And I imagine that more will be forthcoming. So keep your eyes and ears open so you can sign up for those as well. And I hope that you would take what you learned about adaptive leadership and how it can help you not only in your PTA, but in your family, and certainly throughout your journey in leadership and PTA. Thank you guys, and may everyone have a great day.